Over the past few weeks we have been voting for what our favourite Mass Effect 3 multiplayer character was. Now that the votes have been counted, I can reveal the top 10 multiplayer characters as voted by us as a community as we count down to Mass Effect Andromeda's release. So with that, let's take a look at the character who was voted in the number 2 slot, the N7 Slayer Vanguard. Yet another N7 character who was introduced with the Earth DLC. The N7 Slayer is a pretty average human. He has average barriers and health. Again, I say barriers instead of shields because he is a biotic character. All Vanguards are. And again, like most of the N7 characters, he came with some very unique abilities. Okay, he came with Biotic Charge, which is the staple of almost all of the Vanguards in the game, which is an ability that allows the character to charge headlong into foes, knocking them back and damaging them at the same time. As it's done with Biotic Energy, it can set off tech and biotic combos as well, although the N7 Slayer really didn't have any way to set up his own combos, not unless he took his own form of consumable elemental ammo. Now after Biotic Charge, there were normally two camps of people, those who favoured Phase Disruptor and those who favoured Biotic Slash. Both of these abilities were great, and for me personally, at the start I liked Biotic Slash, but as the years have gone on, I prefer Phase Disruptor. Phase Disruptor was a ranged ability. When fired, the N7 Slayer would fire a pinpoint accurate blast of biotic energy consumed from his own barrier shields. This was a risk-reward ability, so you would sacrifice some of your own barriers to deal damage to opponents with this ability. It could be very hard hitting and could be augmented in different ways to deal a knockdown effect to weaker enemies, have a bigger radius, deal more damage against armoured targets or shielded targets, or even drain less of your shields when used. As this ability used pinpoint accuracy, the Phase Disruptor would hit targets that were in the centre of your crosshair, and unlike most abilities in this game, there was no lock-on effect or homing effect with the Phase Disruptor at all. With that in mind, players on PC had a little bit of a better time with Phase Disruptor. But there were workarounds. As the Phase Disruptor by default came with a 4-meter blast radius, you could normally aim it at the feet of targets you were intended to hit. This was a more guaranteed way of dealing damage to them, especially if they were in close range. Phase Disruptor, although it was a biotic ability, it couldn't set off biotic combos. However, it acted a bit more like a combat ability, so it could set off tech combos. Great for if the N7 Slayer was using elemental ammo. Now the great thing about Phase Disruptor is it really synergized well with Biotic Charge, similar to the normal human Vanguard with his Biotic Charge and Nova combo. After depleting your barrier by using the Phase Disruptor, you could instantly recharge it all if you took the correct evolution in the Biotic Charge tree to restore your barriers. The Biotic Charge barrier evolution was a great survivability tool, but not only that, it allowed Phase Disruptor to be used over and over again in quick succession, especially if you had a light loadout. As for Biotic Slash, this worked very similar to Electric Slash, which was found on the N7 Shadow. After a forward flip and a slash of his monomolecular blade, the N7 Slayer would send forth a wave of biotic energy. This would go through walls, obstacles, hitting anyone in its way. It didn't have an infinite range, but it was still far enough to be effective. This could be augmented in different ways in the Biotic Slash tree, but the best thing about this ability was it allowed the N7 Slayer to remain out of line of sight and still deal damage to enemies. As the Slash went through walls, obstacles, hitting multiple opponents along the way even, it meant that he could safely do damage. The damage as well was not anything to laugh at, as it was effective against most types of protection. Biotic Slash was also capable of setting off biotic and tech combos, another bonus for the ability. The major downside about Biotic Slash was the animation wind-up time the player needed until the actual ability was cast, because this could leave the player vulnerable and open to attack, and that's why it was best used when you were in cover, out of the line of sight of enemies. As for the passives that came with the N7 Slayer, these were pretty standard. You had the stuff to increase your weapon damage or power damage. In his case I would go with power damage. And as for fitness, this was one of the rare Vanguards that benefited from melee damage. This is thanks to his survivability from Biotic Charge barrier evolution, as well as his dodge mechanics and actual melee attacks. His melee attacks were done using a monomolecular blade, exactly the same as the N7 Shadow. Tapping the melee button, he would do a series of slashes with his swords that could hit multiple targets. His heavy melee saw the N7 Slayer teleport a short distance before slashing at an enemy with his sword, possibly resulting in the decapitation of that target. His dodge mechanics were very similar to the N7 Fury. This is because he's a biotic and she's a biotic. When he dodged, he would teleport a short distance left, right, forward or back. You could also use this to teleport through cover, allowing him to quickly escape dangerous situations. Again, like the N7 Fury, his heavy melee attack could also be used to teleport through obstacles. The only downside about his dodge mechanics and heavy melee strike was that the teleport used a little bit of his barrier up each time, but it made him very hard to actually pin down with enemy fire. As for weaponry, always go for the lightest weapon you can use. I used to like the N7 Hurricane on this character, although he is also a character that can benefit from a light shotgun due to the fact that he's normally quite close to opponents. Of course, as I already mentioned, take consumable ammunition if you can to set up your own tech combos with this character. Overall, personally, it took me a long time to like the N7 Slayer. It did happen, eventually, and when I did get used to his mechanics and how he played and the pinpoint accuracy of the face disruptor, he became a lot more enjoyable. Despite not maxing out your health and shields as well, he is incredibly tough to take down. This is thanks to his biotic charge barrier evolution and the fact that his dodge abilities and that make him so slippery. On top of that, he can still deal out a ton of damage thanks to the face disruptor and even the biotic slash. And while he's not my personal favourite, I can see why he deserves a place on this list. Now, as always, remember, a disclaimer here, this is a list of the most popular characters as voted by us, which were our favourite characters who we enjoyed the most. Now, don't forget to check back tomorrow for the number 1 slot, and until next time, I've been Darcblade, bringing you the top 10 Mass Effect 3 multiplayer characters. Hope you enjoyed the video, thanks for watching, subscribe and like for more.